So, Phil, I'm looking to update the privacy policy on my website. Could you tell me what I should know or what I need to be aware of?
Well, I think the first thing is to understand is that having a privacy policy or privacy statement on your website is a very practical way forward. It's not the law. So when you look at the legislation does not say you must have a statement on your website. But what it does say is that you have an obligation in law to provide a story of how you're doing processing of personal data at the time that you collect it. Now, if on the website, your website, you have a contact page, which is quite normal, where people supply their details, name, email address, etc., and they submit that to you, then it's very practical to have something where the person providing that information has the opportunity to see the privacy policy at that time, either because it's just a link to it just below it or somewhere on the homepage, that sort of thing. So the key thing to answer your first question is have a link to the privacy statement, privacy notice, whatever you want to call it. There's no one particular name. So that it can be found very easily, and even draw people's attention to it by saying, please take a look at our privacy notice before you submit your information. Bend over backwards, because what you don't want is anyone to say, but no one told me. When actually you make every effort. You don't have to make people read. You don't have to know that people have read the statements. That's not a responsibility that you have, but you have the responsibility to make it available in a fair way, and for that matter, it have the right content as well. So I think that's really the first point I would say about your obligations as much as anything else.
Okay, so what should I be putting in my new policy?
There is a requirement that's laid out in the UK GDPR, formerly the EU version of the GDPR, hasn't changed in that sense, and wherever it goes in there, it's one of those areas of law where it's actually quite specific. There are requirements laid down. Quite a bit of the data protection law is based on principles, and therefore, to some extent, it's subjective as to what you do. But in this case, absolutely, there are things that must do in it, and it's contained in Articles 13 and 14 of the UK GDPR. But so very briefly, you must have your point of contact. Who is the privacy officer, privacy manager within that organisation? How can somebody get hold of them? Identify what are the lawful bases under which you are collecting the data. How long do you tend to store it for? And simply say, we'll store it for as long as we think it's necessary is not an answer, by the way. Who might you disclose it to? Which third parties might you disclose it to? And are you going to transfer it to other outside the UK? That's another factor. And then there's a reminder about the rights. We all have rights under the law. How to get hold of the ICO, and then a little thing under there about say, look, if you have any complaints, come to us first, but don't forget you can always go to the ICO first. So there is a set list of things that have to be in there, and how it's written is very much down to someone's style. There is content. It can be 15 pages long, which is a failure in my view, or it can be 2 pages long, which is more readable and what have you. But however it's done, the privacy notice is written to suit the audience. So if it's a children's website, you'll prepare it in a way that's more easily understandable by children. If you're preparing it for a Polish market, then it's written in Polish or translated into Polish as well as in English. So it is about judging your audience and writing it accordingly. What does not work, however, is looking at something which looks like terms and conditions for Apple or Google. That's a failure, because you're not being fair. You might have all the right words in there, but if it's actually 10 times too long, then people aren't going to read it, and that's not fair. That would not constitute a fair. It would be a breach in a sense.
So can I do this myself, or are there templates that I could use?
You could do it yourself. If you go on the ICO's website, ico.org.uk, there are templates for privacy notices, which is a good start. So yes, you can DIY it. Of course you can, or you can look at somebody else's and copy theirs. But that's not hardly in the spirit of the law. because your privacy notice has got to reflect your business, not somebody else's. So the decision that you make around maybe data retention or lawful basis for processing may well be different to somebody else's. And frankly, if you just copy somebody else, you're not going to be any better off anyway. It becomes pretty obvious. But if you do want to DIY it by going the ICO, well, I say that's a very laudable, as long as you understand what it is that you're talking about. You know, understand the differences between, I don't know, consent, legitimate interest, contractual obligations, vital interest, those sorts of things. And if you're not that clear about them, then it's always best to get another opinion. But I would say that if you blindly just do it, then I think without referring to anybody else, then you are missing an opportunity.
So what opportunities are these that you just said? Could you expand on this?
Oh yeah, sorry. The final product of a privacy notice is a reflection of your business. And for it to be done in a worthwhile way, you have to understand the data flows, the personal data, how it's flowing in, swirling around, being spat out, retention, disclosure, and all that sort of thing. If you don't understand that, how can you build your privacy notice? So, and of course, it's the bit that's seen by the public. You might say it's the icing on the cake. And if that's the only document you ever do in data protection terms, it better be a good one, and it better be relevant to your business. So the very act of developing it, of writing it, forces you to look at how you do your business. Now, where is it coming from? How long are you keeping it for? Do you actually know that, or do you have a sort of we'll just keep it forever type approach, which is, by the way, not recommended. So who are we disclosing it to? Do we need to disclose it to these people? Where is it being stored? Is it being stored in the back bedroom as a backup? Is it in a UK-based server? Is it in America? Is it in North Korea? These things are the sort of things you need to understand. You know, where is this stuff being processed? Because again, there are rules around the international data transfers, which may have an impact as well. So what it's about an opportunity is that if you embrace it and say, I'm going to do this properly, that will force you to find things out about your business that perhaps you would rather not find out, but at least you then know what you have to do in terms of getting that understanding within the business. And from that's the sort of cornerstone of your privacy framework, really. So from that, you'll think, okay, well, I do need to do some of the things, whether it's introduce better safeguarding measures or security measures, whereas to have a data protection policy which sort of identifies what I would like to happen around this area, password policies, consent policies, whatever it happens to be. It's the starting point. The privacy notice is the foundation stone, the starting point for everything else that goes on around it, as well. So that's why I think it would be a missed opportunity just to say, we'll just scribble a few things down, chuck it out there, and sort of hopefully no one will notice. Because the fact is that people do look at these things now, especially from a due diligence point of view, and it's one thing that you can get right, and it's pretty painless to do. And once it's done pretty well, you know, you don't have to do too much to it afterwards, unless you're having a dramatic change of how you run your business. So
presumably you're doing this for businesses. So what approach do you take when you're drafting one?
Well,
and how long?
Well, if I'm helping someone to do this, I have to understand how their business works. I don't. At a fairly superficial level, I don't know all the nuts and bolts clearly. So the business owner would explain to me how they get, for example, customer data, who in their business actually looks at it, has access to it, and where they think it goes. So I can build up a picture very quickly in data flow terms and the personal data flow terms of what's happening to that data. So that would normally takes about 45 minutes to 60 minutes having a conversation. And during that time, I can explain why, the rationale behind some of the questions as well. So for example, what is your lawful basis? Are you using consent to get data? And they say, yes. I say, well, don't. It's the worst thing you can do. if you're relying on your business to survive based on consent. It's like interweaving consultancy within getting the facts as well. So they're coming away with a much better understanding of where they need to be anyway. So I'd then draft it, go back, have a second run at it, check the contents, and it's normally ready to go. And that could be between 2 hours if it's an easy, less complicated business, or maybe 3 or 4 hours if it's quite a convoluted setup where they're using different software packages that I have to look at and assess to see, you know, what impact a third party might have on that as well.
So we're running out of time, Phil. So could you just summarise or give us the key points?
Yeah, I would say, just to remind you that it is an obligation in law that you have, that every business, when they're collecting personal data, they must provide this story, and that's what it is. It's a story about how they're processing at the point of data collection, and it's got to go across in a way that is understandable, that is fair. It provides the transparency of the business. It's not about and it's not about putting up a document that is unreadable either. It's about writing a document which is readable, which is fair, which has the content and is accurate in its content as well. And ultimately, it sets the tone for that business's privacy framework. So if it looks good, if it smells good, it probably is good. If it looks like a fake, and they're very easy to spot, then it probably is a fake, and that probably means that they don't have much behind that either. So, you know, they are setting the tone. If it looks good, people will look somewhere else. If they want to look causing trouble, they'll look somewhere else. They'll find an easy target to cause trouble with as well. And the one thing I haven't mentioned, which we can, if there's time for questions, is around cookies, but that's a slightly separate subject.
Brilliant, thank you.
Okay,